Hello everyone, this is Dr. Willow Ariella coming to you to talk about research. I'm doing a little experiment here, so bear with me if it looks a little odd. So in this class, when for the weekly instructor guidance, I like to do videos about the different topics. And so here we are to get started with chapter 1 from the text on psychological research and research methods. First of all, I want to say I really love, enjoy, whatever, research. As I noted in my faculty information, my brief bio, I think research is really important, and I think we can learn a lot from research that's well done. There is a big difference between well done research and bad research, and unfortunately there's a lot of bad out there. So in this course, as well as in other classes that you'll take for your degree, you'll learn hopefully how to differentiate between good and bad research. Anyway, in chapter 1 of your text, the authors go through some pretty important basic information about research, and so I wanted to highlight some of the points, reinforce some of the points. One of the things that they go through are kind of like why research? Why do we do it? What's so important about it? What's the big deal? And basically it's because people have questions that they want to have answers to. So they note a couple of students who had a question about online dating and salaries. So they wanted to know the answer. And so sometimes research is just as basic or simple, sort of simple in that way, in that people have questions and they want to find out the answers. And there are methods that researchers use to go about finding out answers. And so in this course we're going to look at those kinds of questions and some of the methods that are used and why. So basically, we humans, we have questions, and some of us take the time and energy and money and all of that to actually create a research project to answer the questions. So, and in every field, but this course is about psychology. In psychology, we want to learn about why humans do the things that they do, and what are some of the factors that contribute to what we do. And so we do research to acquire knowledge, to learn new things. And so your authors say that psychology is always exciting and interesting, and I think whatever field you're interested in is going to be exciting and interesting, but if you're interested particularly in human behavior and animal behavior, then psychology is going to be more interesting to you. And because there are so many human behaviors to explore, the amount of research that can be done is probably infinite. And so your authors mentioned that on page 3 that psychologists have developed different types of research methods. I think this is inaccurate. People in all fields of research have developed different types of research methods. But they do say each method is designed to provide an answer to a research question about a specific behavior in a specific setting. And that is a good way of putting it. One of the challenges of figuring out how to determine what research method to use is that there is no one best answer. And we're going to look at that more closely in this course, but in the beginning of a chapter, just thinking about choosing the research method, There are several methods that are shown on page 3. I mean, the answer is not straightforward. So the answer to the question of which research method is the best one, the answer to that question, unfortunately, is it depends. It always depends on your research question. And I'm going to look in more detail about the different methods and how you go about choosing them, but that really is the answer to the question. It depends. And then they mentioned that each method is designed to provide an answer to a research question about a specific behavior in a specific setting. And that's sort of generally true, but it is even more accurate to say that for one particular research question, a particular research method would be better than a different research question. So the point is that the research question drives the research method, not the other way around, generally speaking. And in research, there really is a lot of generally speakings kinds of things, but each specific research project is unique. And so some things are going to be, could be different about a particular research project. The research process, one thing that that I want to emphasize about this table on page 4 is it's a very useful table, and it's fairly accurate. The main thing, though, to keep in mind is that the research process is not necessarily, and it usually is not linear. So that means that researchers don't always start at the top of that table, and they don't always stop at the end of that table. Sometimes they start in the middle, sometimes they start near the end, but it's sort of like one part of the process can inform another part of the process. And so, you know, someone may be reading a research paper and they may start creating a hypothesis, kind of a working hypothesis in their head, and then they've got to do the literature review. So, you know, you can start kind of anywhere, even though you do eventually go through the whole process. And you may change parts of it as you go along in your one particular study. So anyway, the main point is that the research process is not necessarily, and it generally is not, linear. So you can kind of start anywhere as long as you complete the entire part of it, generally speaking. Then the authors discuss finding a problem, and they mention that each research project begins as a problem or question. It's generally called a research problem, even though it may not really be quote-unquote a problem, but that's generally how it's phrased. But usually it's more often a research question. But in the scientific method and in, you know, scientific studies, it's generally called a research problem, even though it's also called a research question. That's the other kind of confusing thing about research. It's great, lots of great tools, but people use different terminology for kind of the same sorts of things, so you'll get used to it. So you start, usually, more or less, you start with a question, like the students that the authors are mentioning. Somebody says, I wonder why, or I wonder what might be contributing to that, or I wonder what might be affecting that person or those people's behaviors. I wonder. So they have a question in mind. But I'll tell you from experience that sometimes the research question or research problem may be the most difficult, because sometimes it's hard to narrow it down. And narrowing down your research problem or question is really, really important. Otherwise, you'd be spending a whole lot of time and reading on other things. So sometimes you have a big research problem or question, and you have to figure out how to narrow it down. Otherwise, your research would be too messy, complicated, hard, difficult. But for me, in my research, sometimes that research problem or question, specifically defining it was the hardest part. Not always, but the hardest. So then the authors go into reviewing their literature. This is called, it's also called research. Reviewing the literature is also called research. So again, using different terminology for kind of the same thing, but it's called research because you have to read a lot of research. So you're actually doing research, but a different kind than, conducting an experimental study as a research project. So reviewing the literature, also called research. You're researching what's been written about similar kinds of questions, research questions. So you've got to find out who else has done what else about similar kinds of questions, theories, issues. And the authors ask a really important question that I encourage you to think about. Why is it important to conduct a thorough review of the literature or research before conducting your research project? It's a really good question. Think about the answer. If you think about it and want to talk about it, please post it in the Ask Your Instructor area. Then they talk about theory. You'll learn more about theory in many classes, but an important point here that they make, a theory is not based on the researcher's guess about the relations among variables. So it's really important. And sometimes people define hypothesis as an educated guess, and that is also inaccurate. So important point about theory and hypothesis. So they talk about what are good theories, not so good theories. I really would say that consider a theory. I don't really like the author's analogy about theories like a roadmap, but maybe it works for you. It doesn't really work for me, but I look at a theory as a lens that you view the world or the research problem through. So to me, it's a lens. It's like you sort of put on this lens, these different colored lenses to look at this particular aspect of the world or your research question, and you view just about everything for that research through that particular lens because you really want to compare it to the theory. So I think theories can be, the concept of theory can be kind of tricky, but a lot of things, when you put these into practice, they start making more sense than just kind of reading about them. And then they talk about hypothesis. It's a tentative statement about what you think you might find from your research, from actually doing your study. So you're making a prediction. If this, then that kind of thing. However, here's a question for you to consider. Not all studies have testable predictions, hypotheses. Why might that be? What kind of studies might you not have a hypothesis? And then they go through some other aspects of the research process, which are important. And then in the looking at in terms of past research and theory, they say that you want to be able to generalize your research as widely as you legitimately can. And this is really important. That they ask a question, could you generalize Driggers and Helms' research to other people besides college students? And you'll learn more about generalization and when it's appropriate, how widely it's appropriate, as you read about other research studies and as you conduct your own research. And again, not a black and white issue necessarily. Can sometimes be tricky, and sometimes people overgeneralize their data. And then people in their research community come back and say, hey, you overgeneralize your data and this is why. And another question, they talk about when you look at your results, you look to see if your hypothesis has been proven or disproven or disconfirmed. And so a question for you is, does having your hypothesis disproved or disconfirmed, proven incorrect, does that mean something quote-unquote bad? Is it bad to have your hypothesis disproved or disconfirmed in research? Why or why not? And then talking about preparing the report, and the authors are really encouraging you, students, to share your findings, which I think is a great idea, great practice to go out and share and be among your peers and talk about your research. And then finding a new problem. So they talk about when you share your results, you talk to your peers, and then you're reading things, and then a new research question comes to mind or a research problem comes to mind. Sometimes sometimes people start their research from their dissertation for their doctorate degree or their master's, and they continue with research questions branching off of that original research problem for the rest of their lives. That's what they do. So they just kind of keep branching off that same kind of question. It's going to be different, every time they do a study, but it may be on the same topic. And other researchers do different kinds of studies. They look at different issues, different research problems throughout their career. So people do different things, and there's no one or right way to do it. But the authors of the textbook say, at the end of the process, you may find a new problem, and you start the process over again. And it sort of works that way. It can. But again, the research process is not necessarily linear. So you don't always go from step 1 to step 2 and back again. But they kind of interrelate. Why is the research methods course important? It's a great question. Someone who's done research and learned about research, I think it's a very important topic to have a good understanding of, because just about everything that we are surrounded by comes from research. Media, advertising, television shows, journalism, things like that, from the foods that we see most commonly in the stores, the foods that are sold at McDonald's, computers, computer programs, cars. Just about everything that you can see or taste or see or feel is influenced by research. And it's really helpful if we have a good understanding of what research is about, so that we can identify good research, valuable research, research that has been well done, from research that hasn't been. And then we can make informed judgments about things. So, thank you for your time and attention. Hope you found this video helpful, useful. I am excited about the course and your learning about research, and look forward to your discussions. Aloha.